Okay, greetings, brethren. Welcome to another edition of Shepherd's Voice magazine here on YouTube. Let's get started. I just want to mention a couple of things in advance. I mean, when you're preparing messages like this, you always try to understand what the needs of the brethren are in terms of what to talk about. Because I don't want to make it all about what I think needs to be said. I'm trying to listen to see what others are concerned about, and it takes a lot of conversations. And this was no exception. I mean, I'm going to actually look at a couple of contemporary secular things just to kind of get us started on this topic and see if we can develop something that we can relate to and is practical and useful and beneficial and all these things. So I just want to start out with that preamble. I want to say a special shout out to Bonnie and Ronald Rich out there in Oklahoma. Always good to hear from you and email messages, and I really appreciate your internet fellowship, I guess, and hopefully one day we'll meet. So with that, let's get started. Now, you heard of the term woke. This is more of a modern, I don't know if it's a slang term, but if you woke, there's a traditional definition of it, but now it's called wokeism or being woke. And being woke right now is defined, I think this is the Webster's definition of woke: aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. The subject I want to talk about today is justice, but I wanted to start out with something contemporary like this to kind of get a handle on where we want to go. So that's like the definition of it. Governor DeSantis is in Florida. He apparently is outwardly objecting to wokeism. He objects to it as has a racial bias associated with it. And he's probably right, because there is a kind of an agenda that comes along with it. There is this power grab that is being done here. So wokeism has a power grab, and I might highlight that again, because I want to really, despite whatever that is, despite however you want to look at it, the social justice warriors that are being pretty aggressive these days, it's really, for a Christian, for a believer, is to really not get involved with that, but actually tie into what God's sense of justice is. We're called to know Him, and justice is something that is very paramount to Him as well. So in terms of understanding justice, we don't want to go with the societal flows. We want to understand what God's justice is in society. So that's what I want to try to wrap our minds around a little bit today. Not in totality. I want to kind of bring it, to a personal level on how we are to conduct ourselves. Because I asked the question here: does your sense of justice match God's? God has a sense of justice, even more than a sense. And does your sense of justice match God's? Is that something you are developing? And one could say that, oh, no, I couldn't possibly match God's sense of judgment or justice. And I kind of wonder about that a little bit. We're all humble about that, aren't we? We're all humble that, I can't possibly match God's sense of justice or anything of His nature. But we're pretty humble when it's convenient, right? And that's one thing. We're going to talk about humility today. Humility is not about when it works for us. Because humility, we can always act and talk humble when it works for us. But humility that comes under true self-examination, being able to face ourselves and in any particular situation or circumstance, is really what counts. Because sometimes when you scratch the surface, and some of us just the wrong way, what comes out is not humility. Now, we're all work in progress, And on this channel, or at least something of the things that I'm trying to do and Darren's trying to do, is to challenge our thinking and challenge ourselves, challenge each other. Because even though this is like a one-directional discussion, I think that we still are challenging each other in some way, because I'm looking at the camera, I can see myself there on the screen. It shows me that I'm in the screen and I'm here, and this thing is running. It's got the red dot and everything else like that. And I'm really just looking at myself. I'm just pointing at myself, to be honest with you. So what is real humility? Because we're tying humility with justice here. Our sense of justice has to be tied to our humility. This is what my reading of the scriptures are. And I want to highlight that a little bit as we move along. All right? Because humility and justice go together. This is what I conclude. Or you can't have one without the other. If we want justice, then humility is needed. Because there's this big cry for justice. In the wokeism in the world, there's this thing crying out for justice. Justice, justice, justice. Okay, that's fine. But humility has to be tied to that. So let's carry on and try to expand on that a little bit in a way that is helpful for us. Because when I see wokeism, the modern vernacular, or what's going on, it does not have a humility component to it. It just simply does not. I just don't see it. In fact, it is an aggressive grab for power. And I'm not the only one who shares that position. An aggressive grab for power and obtain the ability to sanction people. That's what it is. And I think that's what Governor DeSantis has a concern with. This obtain the ability to sanction people. If you really look at it, what it is. So if we want to deal with racial or any other injustice, societal injustices, we need as a society to deal with it humbly. When it's not being dealt with humbly, then there's a nefarious background that's going on behind it to control people and grab for power. That's not justice, and that's not God's way. And we don't want to be caught up in that kind of thing. We just do not. It is also easier for people of power, wealth, and status to do justice to people that have the means. They have access into the corridors of power, and they make it known to us. But again, is there humility in this? A person can have power and want to do justice, but we also, as human beings, need to know our limitations as human beings. So exacting justice is not a very simple thing. I think it requires something that is very important in terms of the biblical narrative, in terms of what justice means and what God wants. So I go back again, how is our sense of justice matching up to God's? That's the point I'm trying to make. Because humility gives us a bridge of solidarity with those who are marginalized in society. And there's people marginalized all over the world. And humility is that bridge of solidarity, because it takes solidarity, kind of a oneness and a communion, with those who are marginalized in society, or who are without, who do not have power. That is integral to executing justice in the world and having God's sense of justice. Because Christ spoke of himself on those terms. Let's read. Luke chapter 4 and verse 18. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed. In order to do this, in order to do what is just recorded here in Luke chapter 4, In order to do this, he must, in the most effective way, he humbled himself to do this. And I don't need to elaborate on that. Came down from heaven from an exalted position and humbled himself accordingly. To create and establish, or more effectively establish, because I think there was always that bridge, of solidarity with those who are marginalized, those who are oppressed. And it says so here. And we are to align ourselves with this kind of thinking, or this nature. It's just more than just something intellectual. Has to be part of our nature. Because in Romans 12, verse 16, live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Okay? Don't even put on an artificial facade of humility. It's also reflected here in Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. He has told you, O man, what is good, and what the Lord requires of you, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. I mean, you really can't really separate the two. You can't really bifurcate humility and doing justice, and to do kindness, is what I see here in Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. Is this difficult for us to do? I like asking these questions. And in writing notes, there's things that are coming to my mind. So I ask this question, is this difficult for us to do? Because are we all not so preoccupied with advancing our lives and for our own sakes all the time? I mean, there's a lot of things I do for me to advance my interests in this world, whether it's work and talking to people and meeting people and obtaining things and fixing things that bust. We're trying to secure business, all these things that we do, or entertainment. So when you look at this thing, when you look at what is put here, what does the Lord God require of you but to do this? And yet there's this conflict in life that we all share, is when we're preoccupied in advancing our own lives for our own sakes. And we need to recognize that. I mean, these things we are going to do. But I just want to kind of bring these things out, because I think sometimes it's good just talking about them, because we're having a conversation here. I mean, you have your thoughts, and I have mine, and I just want to bring these up. So we get caught up in stuff. We really do. And not consider things that are of greater need for others. So I've come to conclude that our sense of justice has a lot of influence on our ways and our thinking. I was thinking about maybe entitling this message God's Justice and Ours, but maybe another title is Our God a Woke God? Let's see what we decide to do. At any rate, justice is of supreme importance to God. It is of supreme importance. Let's take a look here how it ranks. Psalm 89, verses 13 and 14. All right? Psalm 89, verses 13 and 14. I have them in my notes. You have a mighty arm. Strong is your hand, and high is your right hand. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. That couldn't be more explicit, could it? Of your throne. And that throne is of the universe, and of God's kingdom. How can we disagree with it? Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Proverbs chapter 21 and verse 3. To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable than to the Lord than sacrifice. Again, it's of paramount importance. Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 24. But let the one who boasts boast about this, that they have the understanding to know me, that I am the Lord who exercises kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. For in these I delight, declares the Lord. Straightforward. And add to this, to know his justice and kindness is to have that same sense of it ourselves. Because if we're going to say here, if somebody's going to boast, let them have, they that have understanding to know me. If we're going to know him, like we cannot say he's doing the right things. God is doing the right things. To understand that he's doing the right things, kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth, we need to delight in them as well. To know them is to also for us to delight in them in doing so. We want to be a part of the program, not observers, speculators, or opiners. We want to be part of the program, the best of our ability. We have limitations, but humility actually helps us overcome those limitations. There's a lot to be said about God's justice on earth as he sees it, as given by the prophet Isaiah. So let's turn to chapter 59, and I'm going to just do a select scriptures here from my notes. Just follow along as you would. Behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened that it cannot save, nor is his ear heavy that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have separated you from God, and your sins have hidden his face from you, so he will not hear. For your hand is defiled with blood, and your fingers with iniquity. Your lips have spoken lies, your tongue has muttered perversely. No one calls for justice, nor does any plead for the truth, that they trust in empty words, and speak lies, they conceive evil and bring forth iniquity. Verse 9. Therefore justice is far from us, and nor righteousness overtakes us. We look for justice, but there is none, for salvation, but it is far from us. And looking at verse 15. Yes, so truth fails, and he who departs from evil makes himself a prey. What it's kind of saying here is the only way to survive is to kill or be killed. Join the woke mob or else. This is called social warring in the modern sense, in the modern terms. What social warring and those social warriors are saying is we need to get mad at somebody. There needs to be a villain. Find the villain. Attack the villain. Find these villains. Get angry. Get mad. Get out there and show your force. Show you're angry. Find the villain. Whether it's a race or a religion or a people or some secular group, find that villain. And that's wrong. And even wokeism goes as far as national standards, pointing to these other countries, pointing to them as villains. What purpose does that serve? Violence and an outward expression of contempt is somebody's malign sense of justice. When I see people getting angry and mad, that is a maligned, they get contemptible. That is a malign sense of justice. It doesn't really serve any purpose. And we're not called to participate in that. So we get a lot of proud people out there calling for justice, and I would not be taken in by them. Just don't. They need to villainize other ideologies and all these kinds of things. This goes on and on. So even so, it's not for us to join the ranks of social warriors. It's not for us to do that. It's not our calling. It is we see them, and we see these things more and more, and even in Christian circles, whatever you want to call it, the broad range of Christian circles. Christ did not come to judge the world. In some Christian circles, they're villainizing certain groups of types of people. And I understand that they may be behaving ungodly, but let's kind of be careful about villainizing different groups of people. Do you think we really need to be doing that? Personally, I don't see it helpful. You may have some differing opinions. But Christ did not come to judge the world. In John 12, verse 47, if anyone hears my words and does not believe, I do not judge him. For I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. Now, if I can take God's words and take them out to the streets, Christ's words, and they do not believe me, it's not for me to judge them either. The word is out there, but it's not for us to judge others who are ignorant of what was being presented. It's not for us to do. That takes too much energy. And that's what Christ did not come to do. They're not here to do that either. Excuse me. So continue on in Isaiah 59. In verse 16, and the Lord saw it and it displeased him that there was no justice. He saw that there was no man and wondered that there was no intercessor. Therefore his own arm brought salvation for him, and his own righteousness sustained him. So here he takes it up himself for salvation. And we see that being played out in history through Jesus Christ since then. So with that, let's just back up a little bit here. Let's just back up on the subject historically and try to get a larger picture of what's going on. Let's just take a break here. Try to do a kind of an inset to see what we can grasp the larger picture. God has always wanted humans to live in a moral and just society. He's always wanted that from the very beginning. And there have been several attempts to do so. Let's talk about that. What's the first attempt? What is the first attempt? Well, it's Adam and Eve. Garden of Eden. That's the first attempt. They were created with a moral conscience. We can kind of go back and look at that kind of thing. When the serpent approached Eve and said, what's wrong with this tree? Well, God said we shouldn't touch this thing. And then they got deceived. But the moral conscience didn't work. It didn't work out. So God created a moral conscience with Adam and Eve, but that was not sufficient, evidently. Because he could not give them the commandments and say, you shall not. You shall not do this or this or that. Because if they gave them the commandments, they would know the knowledge of good and evil. But what he did is he gave them a moral conscience. He could not tell them, for example, do not commit adultery. And I guess the question they say, with who? Is there somebody else we don't know about here? What is this adultery thing? Then they would have known the knowledge of good and evil. And that's the important thing to understand. Because some people ask, why didn't he just give them instructions? Why didn't he tell them about this serpent? Well, then they would know the knowledge of good and evil. But he gave them a moral conscience to which to live their lives. And we know how the story played out. Because the conscience can easily be manipulated. And you know that, and I know that. It thinks it's doing good, but is actually doing evil. The conscience. It can be dulled. It can be overcome by natural desires and drives. So the conscience, if something needs to supersede it, we need explicit moral laws to supersede our conscience. Our conscience is not enough, as we see here with Adam and Eve. So they knew the knowledge of good and evil when they ate of the knowledge of that tree. Now they find out things are not so good. It's a whole other story, and I've written about this before. Couldn't give them the commandments, because then they would know the knowledge of good and evil. The question comes to mind for me. Is the gift of the Holy Spirit supposed to elevate my conscience? I don't think so. I don't think so. Is it to replace it? Perhaps. Or perhaps to rule over it, the Holy Spirit. Paul says, nothing good in me dwells. So I think in my terms, I think I'm on a reasonably good standing when I look at the presentation of Paul to the Romans, is that our conscience is not sufficient. It can easily be dulled, easily be manipulated, easily overcome. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, as we should be, we're having a conversation here, we know that to be true to this day in our walk. Because people are not basically good. There's this idea out there that people are basically good. That's not true. Those who think differently think evil is due to outside forces. That's not true. Actually, society did this. Made that person evil. We see a lot of this emanating from lectors in the churches of God, blaming society and Satan for all these ills. But that's really not what's going on, is it? But if we're honest with ourselves, because we want to be honest with ourselves. For me, hopefully I trust for you too, the battle is primarily through our own inner world of our own nature. Our own nature. Our weaknesses, our addictivenesses, or selfishnesses and laziness or whatever is where the battle is, internally. That's the battle I fight. And so do you. And it takes the power of God to overcome it. So I think I'm on good standing there without going into a whole theological discussion. Let's talk about another attempt that God made for a society that's moral and has justice. What's the next attempt after Adam and Eve? Now, their next attempt was Noah. God revealed, and after the flood, he found grace in God's eyes. God revealed in Genesis 9 some basic moral laws. Do not murder, but eventually mankind got ambitious. So he started to reveal, which beyond their conscience, some moral laws that come from God. So Genesis chapter 8 and verse 20 and 20 to 22. The Noah, I think it's chapter 8, if I'm not mistaken. Noah built an altar to the Lord. He took some of every kind of clean animal and every kind of clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. When the Lord smelt the pleasing aroma, he said to himself, I will never again curse the ground because of human beings, even though their inclination of the human heart is evil from youth onward, i.e., not inherently good. And I will never again strike down every living thing as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night will not cease. This was another attempt because things just went awry in society until God said, repented of what's going on, and the flood came. But humanity was able to continue through the grace of God. What's the next attempt after Noah? Israel. This is the third effort to improve morality and justice, which is what God intended for us to live in the whole time. Through the revealing to a specific group of people, change the model and spread ethics to the world. To the extent they were successful and still do. But that eventually failed, at least as a covenanted nation. But there was more laws and more revelation in terms of how to have a just and moral society that was given through Israel. But God has always wanted a moral and just society. This is what God has always wanted. And I think we all want that. But we're not going to get it through our own conscience. We're not going to get it through wokeism because of the agenda. We're only going to get it through God's law. Israel in history finished the Torah. When you look at the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, which is considered the Torah and the basics for understanding. We also have the prophets, but the Torah, as it's called. The Torah, if you read it through and study it, is preoccupied with justice. It is. Because this is what God wants. But the creator of the laws is also concerned with mercy. That's a big element of it as well. If the world was ruled solely by justice, society was ruled solely by justice. You do wrong, justice needs to be made. It would be destroyed. We would destroy everything. This almost happened at the time of Noah. But if ruled by, say, mercy, there would be no room for justice. An overabundance of mercy gives evil permission and results in injustice. And the world would be essentially the same thing. It would be destroyed. So we need both for society to work. Justice and mercy. Wokeism is only seeking justice. And so it is destructive. When the more a society adopts laws aligned with the Torah, the laws of God, the better it will be. This by nature. You don't need a covenant. You don't need any of these things with God. But the more a society or a nation aligns with the Torah, with God's laws, the better it will be. It'll be more just. It'll be more moral. It'll have the balance of mercy and justice. That's just the nature of it. Western nations, such as the U.S., seem to have adopted many of the ethics of the Bible. That seems to be the case, as opposed to, say, many other countries. But I want to make this point clear. The U.S. is not another attempt by God to establish a moral and just society to be a model to the world. America is not designed or designated or another attempt by God to find justice and present justice and a model to the world from which others will learn. America is not another attempt. Many out there in religious circles and Christian circles and Church of God circles seem to think that it is. And some very conservative commentators out there is that America is the world's last great hope for liberty and justice. And that does not align with Christian thought or biblical thought. So we don't want to adopt that attitude. So we see here in Isaiah chapter 59, and now we'll look at 16 and 17, and it says here, now he himself, now he is personally involved more than with even Israel. Therefore his own arm brought salvation to him, and his righteousness it sustained him. So here's the last attempt for society of justice and morality. And this has long-term consequences. Now he takes it on himself. So fundamentally, when he's done this, when Jesus Christ came and took on the sins of the world, the Lamb of God, what has he done? What has he done in the fullest extent of the world, fullest extent of our understanding? He has taken responsibility for his creation. He himself. He's taken responsibility for his creation. I'm not talking about taking the blame. This happened because of him. But he's taken on responsibility. If he is the Lamb of God, then he's taking on responsibility. And now it's up to him to decide how this is going to play out in the long term. He now is taking on the arm of justice. This is his fourth and last attempt. If there's another attempt, it builds on this one. And this is what we're participating in, brethren. What he's doing here is what we are now participating in. And he has done this in humility to make that bridge of solidarity as he came and he humbled himself with those who are marginalized in society, with those who need him, those who are on the wrong end, or on the bad end of justice, or on the end of injustice, because they lack power. So, we as a people, we have much revelation now. We've seen the story being played out. We see the teachings. Everything's coming together. Everything is culminating. And here we are on the culminating side of things, I think. Learning, and God and Jesus Christ came to show the Father and many things like this. Then are we not even more responsible? So we have much revelation for morality and justice. And we recognize that our conscience alone cannot suffice. Don't rely on it. Trust me. Don't rely on your own conscience. We've been given power from the external, from God, and it's to be incorporated into our hearts. If we rely on our conscience too much, we are bound to stumble. And I know that. And for us, too much who is given, the more is required. It's just the reality. That is reality. So we look at God's attempts here, just to kind of give a broader understanding. I hope this was helpful, just kind of going through this, to see what God is doing, and understanding our impact or our own activity in terms of our walk on his consecutive revelation as he goes along. So in 1 John chapter 4, he says, God is love. God is love. And to understand some of his motivations, we need to be able to love too, for God is love. If we don't love, we won't understand God at all. We want to know him. Because every expression of God is born out of love. If God is love, then every expression that comes from him is out of love. The source of justice, God's justice, is love as well. And we look at the motivation behind sending his own son. He sent it out of love. The motivation of sending his son, as he did, was not to fix a problem so much, but to fix this issue, to make a point, to win an argument, or vindicate himself somehow. It was love that was behind it. So if our sense of justice is based on vengeance and retribution for wrongs, then we got a problem. Because our motivation needs to come from a sense of love as well. And it won't align with God if we don't. We want our sense of justice to align with his, and an adoption of how God operates. Because vengeance is mine, I will repay, says a sovereign God, who has taken responsibility, and who alone has a sovereign righteousness that can exact retribution. But he has no pleasure in the death of the wicked, as many people do today, because that's their sense of justice. It's interesting, and we'll just read it in Corinthians here about love in a second. It mentions that love does not keep a record of wrongs. If God is love and love does not keep a record of wrongs, how do we account for things brought into judgment, including as in the closing verses of Ecclesiastes, including every secret thing? The resolution to this question, I believe, is motivation. Because love always seeks reconciliation. That's what love does. Reconciliation between people and their God. We want people to be reconciled with their Creator. Ultimately, that's his desire. That's his will. When you say, your will be done, this is what we're talking about. It's not God's will that anyone should perish. We want his will done, and that he is glorified, and that he is known, and that those in society, those who would hear him, those who are willing to respond, and those who he's called, and those ultimately in the future will get to know him and be grateful for who he is and appreciate him for who he is. This is really the goal. So moving along here. The focus of love is not one's own pain, keeping a record of wrongs, holding a grudge. Focus of love is not one's own pain, but the needs of the loved one. It's that outward side of the thing. Love is outwardly going. That's the point. So there's no question about that. So the law has been created by God motivated by love. It's an expression of his love. The Torah is an expression of his love. It always has been. So if God is love, and every expression of God is of love, and that law is an expression of his love, what does Paul teach in Romans about this? In Romans chapter 13, verse 10, he says that love is the fulfillment of the law. Not that we didn't hear that before, right? Love is the fulfillment of the law. It's true, not because Paul said it. Paul is not defining anything new to us. It's just a matter of fact. And he was inspired to say what is truth. It's not because Paul said it. Let's continue on. So love must prevail. So let's look at 1 Corinthians 13. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It is not puffed up. It does not behave rudely. It does not seek its own. It is not provoked. Thinks no evil. Does not rejoice in iniquity. Rejoices in truth. Bears all things. Believes all things. Hopes all things. And endures all things. And love never fails. It expects laying down on our own life for our friends, even if they don't deserve it. That's what love expects of us, what he just wrote here. This is the expectation. It expects hope and prayer for its enemies, believe it or not. And there's some great expectations in love. There's great expectations, and they're very huge. It expects the impossible, does it not? What I just read here is almost an expectation of the impossible. It expects the impossible from you. But what do the scriptures say? But all things are possible with God. And in writing this, I said that. Then I note, with God. All things are possible with God. Does not mean God does it all. God will take care of it. It's not what with God does not say that. With includes your participation in this. We need to be actively participating in this program. To know and practice love, to know justice, to know morality, to align ourselves with God's sense of justice. And we'll learn it. And we'll know it. So with God is participating with Him. I like to look at things practically as I can. So I'm saying a bunch of things. So I thought I would do this, is go to Matthew 18. Matthew 18. And there's something very teachable along these lines for us as we move along here. Matthew 18, when somebody brings up Matthew 18, it always goes, okay, right? It's always referred to how to resolve differences within the body of Christ, or between brethren. You know, it not necessarily that's not necessarily the whole point of it at all. It teaches something also, it teaches that, but also something far more important. Because this is something that's treated as a prescription on just how to deal with somebody who has offended you. All right. Okay, that's fine. I know it's used that way. But let's kind of back up here and look at Matthew 18 as I am conveniently opened up to here, and kind of verse 7. Let's go here to verse 7. Woe to the world because of offenses, for offenses must come, but woe to that man whom the offense comes. All right. Woe unto them. Well, that's their problem, right? Just blow it off. Well, look at them. You offended me. That's your problem. Woe to them. That's their problem, right? What he's doing here is he's actually challenging us in a way. Christ is telling us that we need to take some responsibility here because humility demands self-examination. Have you ever offended anybody? I've offended people. All the time. And sometimes for the right reasons and sometimes for the wrong reasons. If we're honest with each other, it requires self-examination. I think about this sense of justice, and I haven't completely wrapped my mind around this, but when he has taken responsibility for the world, if Jesus Christ has taken on the responsibility for the world, we need to start thinking about sharing in that responsibility somehow. I don't know. We don't have to vet this out. But I want to put the challenge on us. Because we all talk about humility when it's convenient, right? As I talked about before. So if he took it upon himself to be responsible, I think we need to take on our own responsibilities, our own self-examination, and not be fearful of doing that. God has given us, He's given us the Spirit of God to have the courage to self-examine, to do that self-examination, uncomfortable as it might be. In verse 11, the Son of Man has come to save which is lost. In verse 12, let's continue on. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 and go to the mountains to seek the one that is straying? The one who is straying. And if he should find it, surely I say to you, he rejoices more over the sheep than over the 99 that did not go astray. So there's a reconciliation factor here that is being delivered. Now, let's go on to the verse that I want to get to here. If I got my notes carefully presented here, so yeah, in verse 6. Okay, to page 6. Now, when I'm looking at, I've learned over the number of years is that if I want to interpret what Christ is saying, particularly in the Gospels, what brought up this whole conversation in the first place? As we go here, we start picking it up here in verse 15. What brought this on in the first place? Let's back up and go to chapter 18 and verse 1. At this time the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" This is what triggered all the rest of this discourse here in Matthew 18. I like to look to see what triggers things and understand what is being said later by Jesus Christ. Who's going to be the greatest? Seems to be a big deal with the disciples. And Jesus called a little child to him, set him on the midst of them, and said, "Surely I say to you, unless you become converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one little child like this, in my name, receives me." So, he's talking about humility. The whole rest of this, a chunk of this rest of this chapter has to deal with the preamble of humility. To understand what he's talking about here is to deal with humility. So here, when we go to Matthew 18 and pick it up here, and the scripture is often talked about, let's pick it up here, verse 15. "Moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother." How are you going to be able to do this? How are you going to be able to do this? And this is often quoted as saying, this is how you deal with somebody who has offended you, to make it right. Because it's obviously the right thing to do, not to blab it to everyone, tell everyone to take it to them, tell them to take it to everyone privately. Now, that's fairly good words of wisdom. And I don't strictly follow this, because sometimes there are those who want to deal with a brethren that has offended them or something, or caused them to be upset. And they want to deal with it because oftentimes the offender doesn't often know it. But sometimes they need counsel. They want to talk to somebody else who's spiritual and say, how do I approach this situation? And that's going on right now. Some people have approached me with some things, and I've approached other people with the same thing. Is I want to deal with this appropriately. And the idea here is to do it humbly. It says, moreover, in connection with what this chapter begins with, to humble themselves. Therefore, whoever humbles himself can go to their brother for the right reasons and the right agenda to go to them. And sometimes people need some counsel in order to get their headspace in that right place. And I've needed it. And sometimes I couldn't actually do this because I was just too upset. So I needed to kind of find a buffer in there. So is it to be strictly adhered to? Not entirely, in my assessment. But the important point here is to be humble about it in every step of the way. To be humble about approaching a situation. Because there are some, when they're offended, do not approach it humbly and blast the one who offended them and make it about themselves as opposed to making it about the one who offended or the offender. The idea here is restoration. The idea here is restoration. If it's not about restoration, it's really meaningless. And that's not justice. That's not morality. And that's not mercy. No, go around trying to think you need to find vindication. It's a big thing. So what is being taught here is not about fixing things necessarily. It's about restoration of fellowship and the fellowship between your brethren and God. This is what this is all about. Selling us is out of interest for your brother or your sister in Christ. It has nothing to do with being vindicated. You could win the argument, but lose your brother. And that's not what we want, do we? Scripture's not vindicating. It's not settling a wrong that has been done to you. So many see themselves as victims sometimes. Okay, it's fine. If you're a victim, you're a victim. So even victims must act ethically. And that's also taught in the Torah. We must act ethically. And that is something that's lost in the woke crowd. The claim in the woke crowd in the modern day times is that they're victims. And they're speaking out for victims. But they're not acting ethically because they have an agenda. And I believe that looking at the evidence. It's aggressive, and they want to punish, they want to silence, and they want to demonize those who oppose them, regardless of what they're thinking. They don't care what other people are thinking. It's not the way, it's not God's way. And we don't want any part of it. It's about helping your brother and understanding his wrong thinking that has led to this transgression. And it takes humility. If you don't have it, don't even bother with Matthew 18. Just forget about it. Try to find, you're the problem. You're the problem if you can't find the humility. There are those who have blown up and quit congregations and hurt people because they didn't have enough humility. The surface got scratched in the wrong way and they blew up and just took off. And a big scene of it. I've seen it several times. It's all about them. It wasn't about finding a brother and restoring each other and finding a better understanding. It just wasn't. So it happens all the time. So without the humility, don't talk to me about Matthew 18 and 15 onward. We need that first before we get anywhere with each other. So it's not about, this whole thing is not about you anyway. It's about saving and restoration. It's about the welfare of your brother. And that's what justice is. That's a big component of justice. We talked about before. I mean, there is justice that needs to be done. and there's mercy, but you can't have just one or the other. Otherwise, we'll just destroy each other. We'll just be destroyed. Wokeism is destroying society because it's got no mercy. It just wants punishment. It's just a big problem. And I think what's being played out here in wokeism, it even teaches us how God's ways are so much superior. For society, we live justly and morally. And we continue on here. Verse 18 to 20. We will just read on. Verse 16, if you will not hear, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of every two witnesses every word will be established. And if he refuses to hear them, tell it to the church, but if he refuses to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and tax collector. Surely I say to you, whatever you bind on earth and will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again I say to you, that if two of you agree on earth concerning anything that they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For there 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them. If they're gathered in humility, in my name, with, going back here, whoever helps themselves as a little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Going back to humility, these scriptures apply. Now let's understand what's being said here. If you go to the congregation, because that's our society, isn't it? We want a moral and just society. Our society, for a good chunk of it, really, is our fellowship amongst God's people, sparsely or condensedly. It doesn't matter. For justice and mercy to be working in fellowship, it's important that the fellowship be in the best spiritual condition to undertake this. What he's talking about here, in terms of disciplining or correcting a brother. It has to be in a very healthy spiritual condition. The person who has been offended, or the person that needs reconciliation with a brother and seeks it out, having been offended, needs to act ethically and go to that brother and deal with it for the purpose of restoring that fellowship. And if he doesn't hear the elders, those elders better be also very spiritually oriented. And the church, the congregation, the fellowship, the ecclesia, whatever the fellowship or assembly is, has to also be of the same mindset, of have a spiritual condition to undertake what is being going on here. Because disciplining a member requires the congregation to examine itself and discipline itself. So it's not about going one directional, it's about self-directional and outwardly directional in dealing with a brother that has erred against you, or erred against the congregation, or erred against God. It has to be with a lot of self-examination that is going on. And we need this. We need not to be scared of it, instead of getting angry and just focusing on somebody's transgression against us. And this is very real, because I've said we're all sort of hypocrites in some way, on some level. So we don't want to be just looking at somebody and making a judgment and just seeking justice or retribution. That's not what this is about. And Christ makes that clear as he's talking through here. So the congregation needs to examine themselves in this and be discipline themselves. It says, whatever we loose, which means permit, in an assembly, it must first be permitted by God. Now I want to go here to this word. There is a term in here that says agree. Whatever you agree, whatever you bind on earth and will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be heaven. Again, I say to you that any two agree on earth. This word agree Any two of you agree on earth. This word agree is rather interesting because it means to be in harmony. It has to be in absolute harmony. And the Greek word that is being used here, agree, as I understand it, is how we get the English word symphony. So you go watch a symphony, they're all in agreement, they're in harmony. If they're professional, and not some maybe a high school band, I don't mean to be critical of that, but they're professional and they're in harmony. Which comes from our English word symphony. And this expression here, it's also used back here, I think in Matthew 16, I believe, in verse 19, and I will give to you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. That is a familiar rabbinic expression, apparently, back then. It means to bind on earth. Bind on earth means forbid to be done, and loose, permit to be done. But either way, they're already bound and loosed in heaven. So if you're in alignment with Christ's will, then it's done. It's bound and loosed. Whatever was decided, but it has to be decided on God's terms. And only humility can this work. So I'm kind of revisiting, I'm kind of exploring this, taking it personal to us. We can start out by talking about this woke generation and say, look what they're doing. But we really want to, it's really not the big problem. Ours is focusing on our own sense of justice. Matching God's, which is our connection and our bridge to this, is through humility, where we make that connection with those or marginalized society or brethren that are erring or whatever. These are the connections we want to make. That's justice, along with mercy. And it comes to us and it teaches us, and God teaches us through His Holy Spirit to do these things. I hope that is helpful. And humility is the only way this is going to work. He lays it out here. When they come to Him with a question, who's the greatest? It's not really what's relevant. Whoever wants to be great does align with God's justice and mercy, and it comes through humility. Humility teaches a lot, and self-examination teaches us this. Humility requires it. So in terms of a congregation being spiritually prepared and a spiritual condition to undertake these things, I've been in fellowships, or at least one in recent memory, where the condition of that fellowship, combined churches, was in no position, absolutely no position, terrible condition spiritually, to do this kind of thing. Because it happens. Just don't assume you're there every Sabbath. Everybody isn't just in total good spiritual condition to deal with these things. Because I've seen when the difficulties occurred, the congregation was very political and very cliqued. There were biases and loyalties, and there was politics going on. One in particular was the political gateway, controlling what people think they wanted them to believe. There was just the church was in no condition to deal with difficulties like this. And it didn't work out. There was no harmony. So there was just no way that Matthew 18 could have been used. It was just that the way it goes. And those difficulties occur. In James chapter 3, and just kind of narrowing it down to us, and we know these scriptures, but, it's always good to kind of make sure we're on. Oh, it was Titus. Oh, where are we here? Yeah, here we go. James chapter 3. If we want harmony in the church, we want or have our own. We got to, basically what I'm saying here is get our own house in order. We want justice on earth. We want to see God's program being played out. To whatever influence we can have, we have to have our own program in order. James chapter 3 and verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. Meekness. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. Don't go talking, great swelling words on the Sabbath, coming in your best dressed clothes, following the rules. But if there's bitter envy and seeking in your hearts, it doesn't matter. None of this. Let's not talk about societal woes. Concern yourself with yourself. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. It's wokeism. That's what that is. Where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure and peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. No hidden agenda. Not trying to get control of somebody or be a policeman or be the court judge. Just looking out for others to see them succeed. You want others to succeed. That's really what it's saying. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. We need to ensure that we have our house in order to align with God's justice. I mean, this is really what it is. And I wanted to take on this topic today in a practical sense, because in a sense, when we're looking at, if we kind of go back to the beginning of our discussion, does our sense of justice match God's? Well, it happens on the smallest level. It starts there. It starts with you. It starts with your humility and taking a look and proper self-examination. Because when you've had your surface scratched and you just react in a way that is not Christian, where you want to defend your own pride and ego, then you need to kind of do a little bit of examination and not be scared to do that. And talk to brethren that are spiritual and get help with this. Because we need to be the authors of our own environment, or essentially what I think that's what he's being taught here. We want a good fellowship, we want a good environment to work with. And I mean, if society at large would adopt more of this, that would be great. It's not the Torah, the teachings there, there's so much to learn. It's not what God's expectations are, and we see this in the prophets. To walk humbly before our God, I think we'll be so much better off as a people. So much better off. And we can have this fellowship, whether it's long distance or not. I just want everybody to take some time to think about these words today. Hopefully they're appreciative and helpful. And so I'm just going to sign off here before my voice completely goes out. And so I just want to hope you had a blessed Sabbath. If you watch this on the Sabbath or any other date, hope you had a blessed day. And thank you for watching. Sure to write, give us a like or dislike, whatever your choosing is. So next time, see you on Shepherd Voice channel on YouTube. Take care, brethren, and God bless all of you.